Britain has voted to leave the European Union. Prime Minister David Cameron, who spearheaded the failed campaign to remain in the EU, has announced his resignation. So how did this happen? And what next for British politics?
It happened because, overwhelmingly, the issue of immigration. Since 2004, when Britain opened up to workers from Central and Eastern European countries, which had just joined the EU, immigration has risen in terms of political salience. And really, what happened yesterday was a day of reckoning that's been in the pipeline for 12 years. And it was enough to overwhelm the Remain argument, David Cameron's argument, which was all about economic security. So in a face-off between the public's hostility to immigration and its nervousness about the economy, they ultimately plumped for the former.
But if you look at the electoral map, the big cities voted to remain. I mean, London being the most obvious, but also Manchester. Scotland voted, although there was a low turnout, voted for remain. It was the coast, the English shires, if you like. Buckinghamshire not noted for its problems with immigration.
No, exactly. But this has been a phenomenon for years, that some of the most sceptical opinion on the subject is concentrated in areas which hasn't always experienced the highest amounts of immigration, especially in the sort of northeast of England, which were the early signs that Leave were going to do well last night. So there's nothing surprising in that particular correlation. What the map does show is an enormous divide between metropolitan Britain, London, but also Manchester, Liverpool, Glasgow, Edinburgh, and rural England, market town England, Labour voting post-industrial towns in the north of England. That culture gap is absolutely enormous now, and I suspect unbridgeable in the short term.
But also, this is an incredible blow to the political establishment in Britain. A divided Tory party, that's why David Cameron's gone, but also the Labour Party that seems to have been unable to bring its voters, normal voters, traditional voters out.
Absolutely. The political establishment threw absolutely everything at this campaign. You had both main political parties, you had the Bank of England, a lot of the private banks, big businesses, the IMF, a lot of independent think tanks, all reiterating the same view that Britain's economic interests would be threatened by exit, and the public still went the other way. So as a measure of exactly what kind of low esteem the governing classes are held in this country, it really is an astonishing result. And I don't see how this gets better anytime soon, because what the Leave campaign have to do now is deliver all the things that they've said they'll deliver, radically lower immigration and so on.
It's also a big statement about Britain, because people look to this country as a stable, predictable, politically stable country. And now this is really up in smoke, because the relationship with the European Union, the membership, goes back more than 40 years.
Yeah, and the application goes back 50 years, to 1963 when we first had a go at joining. In the absence of exceptional productivity, which we don't really have in this country, or amazing infrastructure, which we don't really have in this country, what we offer to investors is stability, as you say. And for the medium term, we will not have stability. Already there's been a change of Prime Minister, or there will be a change of Prime Minister very soon. After that, there's a prolonged process of extricating from the European Union and determining the exact terms under which Britain does that. That will be the work of months, if not years.
And is there any consensus in the political groupings, those opposed to Mr. Cameron, on what Britain should now get from Brussels? I mean, we're not got membership, so what are we going to have?
I mean, there wasn't a consensus during the campaign, so never mind is there going to be one now. What I think they absolutely can't do, given the result, is deliver something like the Norwegian or Swiss models, where Britain will still observe free movement. If I'm right that the country has voted the way it's voted ultimately because of immigration, it can't possibly observe free movement in the way it has done in the past. So that implies exiting the single market, which is economically the most extreme option, so that Britain no longer has to observe that free movement. And I think that will cause some splits within whatever form the new government takes, because some of them will be extremely nervous about saying no to the single market up front.
Now, Boris Johnson, who is the former mayor of London, and one of the public faces, the big public face of the campaign, talked about Independence Day. Well, we've now got to Independence Day. What does that mean?
It means he probably becomes Prime Minister within 2 or 3 months. David Cameron has said that he'll physically hang around as Prime Minister until the autumn, but the process of electing a replacement, that is a Tory party leader, can begin soon enough. And Boris Johnson has been the overwhelming favourite recently. I imagine he will win. And really it's the question of who takes him on. Is it Theresa May, the Home Secretary? I think she might struggle having backed Remain. I don't think George Osborne, having also backed Remain, is an option at all anymore. And so Boris Johnson, I think, is the most likely.
Can George Osborne survive as Chancellor of the Exchequer?
Possibly. It may be that given how much upheaval there is at the moment, the levers take hold and say, at least for the time being, we can't afford to change both of the top 2 jobs. But there is an incredible amount of resentment against him from the Parliamentary Party and amongst Conservative activists. So even in the job of Chancellor, never mind leader and Prime Minister, he's got a very tough time hanging on.
So finally, Janan, how will David Cameron go down in history?
I think it's the most humiliating exit since Anthony Eden in 1956, who launched the botched intervention in the Suez Canal. Not because his premiership has been disastrous over the past 6 years. You could argue it's been a moderate, tentatively reformist kind of Conservative premiership. But if you call a referendum on an existential question of national destiny, and you take a side and the country votes against you, that's the only thing people will remember. So there's one bullet point next to his name in history, and it's not a good one.
Janan Ganesh, thank you so much.